Hello everybody, welcome back to Debate Hub. We are here, we are in it to win it. I am Chesh, your master debater, and welcome back today. I have with me Dr. Dan, and I'm so excited. I think this is the first time we've actually been on stream together.
I think it is, yeah.
I know
it's very exciting.
You have a story to tell us, and you were actually featured recently on my Dumbfeck Friday, as you were having a very obnoxious conversation about whether or not gender is bimodal.
Yeah, that was a whole thing. That was like 48 hours of fun on Twitter, wasn't it?
I can't believe at how long that, it's not even really over. It's still going.
No, it's still, I pieced out, but it was still going. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm so happy to have you here, and I want to get into this because I've been promised, I was told not to look up anything about this person, not to do any additional research. And I have kept my word. I have done the closest I've seen about anything to do with this guy is a frog. That's all I know. So, Dr. Dan, would you like to introduce the topic and what we're going to do?
Yeah, so hi everybody. What we are going to do tonight is we are just going to take a casual stroll through the career of Harvard PhD Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson, who, for those of you, some of you may know our friend, Dapper Dinosaur, who hosts the Cambrian Bunny Awards every year. Our friend Nathaniel Jeanson was recently nominated this year for 3 Cambrian Bunny Awards and went home empty-handed.
Oh, that's rough.
Couldn't even cobble together a win with 3 nominations. It was a rough night for Dr. Jeanson.
Yeah.
So we're going to go through kind of his history as the go-to PhD for young Earth creationists. He's kind of unique among real PhDs in the creationist sphere because he's a lot younger than most of them.
Oh, okay.
He kind of came to religion earlier in life. Many of the, like Dr. John Sanford, he kind of became a Christian much later on, whereas Jeanson was all through grad school, kind of hiding his affiliation and what he thought of his work. It's kind of an interesting side story there. And we're just going to go through what he's done since then, because he actually puts out, he's put out 2 books in the last 5 or 6 years, and he gets points for creativity.
He sounds
he
like
gets no
what
other points.
Me and Dapper and Bent were joke planning on putting me through Christian psychology school.
He basically did that, but the opposite way for his PhD. He basically said the word. So let's just, won't keep anybody in suspense. Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson has a PhD in cell and developmental biology from Harvard University. I think he graduated in 2009. So this is somebody with completely legitimate biology credentials, right? He, totally 100% legit credentials. There's no disputing that at all.
Right.
And now the disputes can start because now the fun begins. So right out of grad school, Jeanson got hired by one of the big 3 creationist ministries. So there's Creation Ministries International, there's Answers in Genesis, and there's the oldest Institute for Creation Research, and that's where he landed. So he ended up at ICR, and in his they do the little press release, we just meet our new hire, Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson. He said something there that to this day lives online on the ICR website that just frames the whole rest of this conversation. So pull up the screen share that we have here because I want to read this quote to you. He said, and again, this is in his welcome to ICR little press release thing. He said, "I asked myself, how can I use and abuse my training to influence eternity rather than for temporary gain?" So just straight up, he's just like, I got a PhD. I'm now going to lie and use my credentials to advance a cause that are completely contrary to everything I just learned. Straight up.
He said the quiet part out loud.
He said the quiet part out loud, right?
Oh,
Most creationists with PhDs have the decency to keep that thought to themselves.
Or at least they have the decency that when they're bullshitting about something, they're bullshitting in a field that they're not a part of. And this dude's just got his whole dick hanging out. Damn. I mean,
right off the bat. Right off the bat. So
I don't know how I feel about this. I'm kind of
It
impressed.
gets. It gets worse.
Oh, good. That's what I'm here
This
for.
is
This is what I live for. Just real quick, Vandalia for Five said, "I hope one day I can finish my fiction book just like Jensen, but I won't be pretending my fantasy book is actually science." Also, hi Jesse, welcome, welcome, welcome.
oh, we're gonna get there. We're gonna
I
get to the
can't,
books.
I can't believe he just comes out swinging. That
Yep.
and the fact that he used the word abuse right out the gate
Uh-huh.
is just so
No,
yeah,
yeah.
he's lying and he's just letting everybody
Right.
know.
Right. So,
Nice.
well, it's good that you picked up on the fact that he's just telling everyone he's going to lie
Yeah,
straight off the bat, because he was with ICR for a couple years, then he went to AIG, Answers in Genesis, Ken Ham's big thing.
got it.
And you may have heard that AIG is a canvas cloth sack of eggplant. You may have heard that something along those
I
lines
think I've
before.
heard something
Some
along those lines.
some
I'm
of you
pretty
may
sure
have,
it's
some of
caused
you
me
may have
to.
heard things like that
I'm pretty sure it's caused me to
somewhere.
drink in the past.
Yeah, something like that. So he's at AIG now. He's been their
Mm,
go-to genetics person, for a while. It's very kind of like they always promote Jensen as like the guy.
got it.
Um,
Now, did
and
he land there
what
before or after the debate with Bill Nye?
Herman Mays, that was before. So that was, yeah. So this
Gotcha.
is still, so he was at ICR only for a few years, and then he switched over to the other ministry. The big AIG is the big one, right? Like if you're gonna pick one,
Right.
you're gonna go to AIG.
I mean, they
So
do seem like the one that's making the most amount of money.
they are, they hand over fist. Yep. So the thing that everybody needs to understand about Jensen is that there is nobody on earth that thinks less of their audience than Jensen.
Fair? Yeah.
Nobody. There's nobody who treats their audience as just like the dumbest, most gullible people you can imagine.
I mean,
He
he did,
just treats them like they're stupid.
I mean, he did just straight up come out and say he was gonna lie to everybody. I don't know
Yep.
how you can be more like I don't personally. This is a personal thing. I don't particularly mind if people lie to me. I only care if they lie to me poorly. Like if you're gonna lie,
Like,
do a good job.
don't insult my intelligence by
Right?
like making it obvious, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
that's just rude.
Savage
Yeah.
Cobra for 2 said, if you're lying and you know it, clap your hands.
If Jensen was here, he'd be clapping. So that brings us to something he wrote, because he has written a number of, he calls them papers. I call them blog posts.
It's
But a
written
number
on
of pieces,
papers.
you can print them on paper. A number of pieces for AIG's in-house journal, Answers Research Journal, which is
Oh.
rigorously peer-reviewed by the other scientists at AIG. And so he's written a number of pieces for them. And I want to show you a figure from one of them, because it illustrates the degree to which Jensen is completely shameless about lying to his audience about things that he is an expert in.
Oh boy.
So here's this figure where you can
Yes.
see two things here. You can see on top the process of development, where he's talking about a frog going from a zygote to an adult frog in 3 years. And then down at the bottom, he's saying speciation in the young Earth timeline. You have an ancestral cat of some kind speciating into all of the living cats in 4,000 some odd years, right? And what
Specifically
he
the big
says here,
cats. Yeah.
yeah, and what he's saying here is, evolutionists say that creationists need evolution to happen way too fast, that you couldn't get enough species after the ark. But look, if a frog can go from a single cell to an adult frog in 3 years, of course, one kind of cat can go into all these very similar kinds of cats in like 4,000 years. That's a lot less difference than the egg growing into the frog.
Wait. So he's arguing like the development from like a baby to an adult human is the equivalent of like tall people to short people in
Yes.
different societies.
Yeah, like lions and like the difference between lions and tigers. Yeah.
Even that's more extreme than the example I gave. Like there's
Yeah. So here's
Oh,
the thing to
okay.
remember. Here's the thing to remember about Dr. Jensen. His PhD is in developmental biology.
Right.
So he knows the differences between these two things. So
Right.
like development occurs in individuals, right? A single entity goes from a zygote to an embryo to an adult, right? That's a single
Right.
entity. This is not Pokemon. Individuals don't evolve. Populations evolve.
Right. Right.
Right, like it's not like you hatch a Charmander and then like later on it's it evolved. That's not how it works, and he knows that.
This is such an
The second
appropriate
thing
example for this channel.
The second thing here is that development very famously happens within a single generation, right? You go from an embryo to a baby to an adult in one generation. That's the definition of a generation. Evolution happens over more than one generation because individuals don't evolve. Groups evolve, so you can only see the changes when there's turnover.
I just like the idea that every single cat that exists is all still coming from one type of embryo and one.
Oh, when you actually do this math
this
for
one
like
had a
things,
firestone.
yeah, when you actually do this math for groups that have a lot of species and slow generation times, you basically have to get a new species every generation. Like, it's literally like the fake version of evolution that creationists say can't happen. Like Kent Hovind being like, I've never seen a cow give birth to a not cow. But, like, that's what Jensen basically has to have happening in order for, like, the speed to be fast enough.
Yeah, because
with
it would
things
be
that have
like
long generation times.
it'd be like dinosaur legs, egg, chicken flies out.
Yeah, right. Like it has to be that speed in order for his process to work. And then the third problem here, which again Jensen knows because he's built a whole model around solving this problem, is that to go from an egg to a fruit, the genes, they're all there, right? It's all there to develop into the adult. But to go from one species to a lot of species, that's going to involve mutations and large-scale changes and probably new genes and whatever. You're going to need new genetic information. And he just ignores all of this, and he presents this to his audience as though they're supposed to take it seriously.
I mean, I don't know how you could even take this seriously. Not without having, like, an express, drastic misunderstanding of what evolution is in the first place.
Right. And remember, we're talking about Harvard PhD, developmental biologist, should know better. Like, he clearly is just lying.
Well, he does know better. He said he knows better.
So this is what I mean when I say that nobody has less respect for their audience than Jensen, right? These are the types of arguments that he throws out there, completely expecting people to take them seriously. It's just like,
it's baffling. It's baffling. So yeah, there's like a why factor of like, okay, so why is he doing this? Is it for a paycheck? Is it because it makes him feel like he's smart? Is it because he likes to have power over people? Look, they'll believe anything I tell them to.
Oh, I think, honestly, I don't know. I think all of the above. I think I think he's high in his own supply. I think he really thinks he is a genius who is going to overturn, like, evolutionary theory. I really think he believes that.
With that diagram, that one.
Wait till you see his books.
Oh, but wait, there's more. It only gets worse. Vandalia for 5 said, just imagine if all these PhDs use their knowledge for good instead of the evil of AIG. I don't know, considering that this kind of what they're able to produce, I don't really feel like they'd be contributing that much.
Yeah, I don't know about that. This superiority complex brings us to his first book. This is 2017's very humbly named Replacing Darwin. This book from 2017.
I've heard about this book.
That's what we're going to do here. We're going to replace Darwin because he is going to replace. First of all, for anyone who's not like super familiar with evolutionary theory, like Darwinism isn't a thing anymore. It's just not a thing, right? Darwinism was from 1859, and then like genetics was rediscovered in like the early 1900s. By the 1940s, you get the modern synthesis, but even that, people still think that's the thing because we called it the modern synthesis, and that was dumb because it's not modern anymore, and it leaves out a whole bunch of stuff that we learned in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. So now we don't even have the modern synthesis. I think the kind of new way of describing it, the term I like, is the integrated synthesis. But that's kind of neither here nor there. But so he's
science
right
needs
away,
to hire more PR social science stuff.
And just
Call
like
me.
don't name so like mitochondrial Eve was dumb. Naming it that was dumb. That's just endlessly confusing and misleading. So
Yeah.
So he's naming his book like wrong because publicity rather than accuracy is what we're going for here.
Right.
But basically what he does is he proposes a new mechanism of speciation that is supposed to replace evolutionary theory, right? Whatever you want to call it.
I should put this up just in honor of what we're talking about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, sorry, please continue.
So his new theory is that everything was created with lots of genetic diversity called created heterozygosity. And we're not going to go into the science of what that means. It doesn't matter for our purposes. It's a new idea that everything was created with lots of genetic variation called heterozygosity. And then as species diverged when they got off the ark, they lost that diversity. And different lineages lost different subsets of variations, and that's why they're all different now.
For reasons.
Right? That's how speciation is supposed to happen. Now, there's a few problems here. One is because you can't just assume things without evidence and say this is how it works.
Right.
And no, you can't test it. You just have to assume that it works. No, you don't. That's not what we're doing. The other thing is, like, you can do math on this, because if you're going to start with 2 things or 7 pairs of things that have a certain amount of variation, and you need to generate all the variation that exists today, then you need to do this process called recombination. Because, like, there are human genes where we have over 1,000 variants of those genes, right? Yeah. So if you start with, 4 copies, right? Adam and Eve, and they have 2 of each, and they're all different. There's a certain rate at which they're going to swap pieces back and forth. And that rate is thousands of times too slow to account for the variation that exists today. Thousands of times too slow. I've actually done this math.
Oh, of course you have.
Like, I've actually done the math for a representative gene saying, okay, if you have this many chromosomes and this many, this many crossover events, you need this many generations, and you need not 2 people, not their however many 100 kids you have. For one representative gene, you need like 17,000 lineages.
Yeah, I know there's a minimum number of variants that you need within a population to make it functional for X number of years, right? I think the lowest number I've ever seen, and I don't even think it was humans, I want to say it was probably cats, but this is off the top of my head, it was like you needed a minimum of at least 60, and they all had to be like not related to each other. Yeah. So there's this thing called the minimum viable population, and you need to have, so your effective population size, which is your basically how much genetic diversity is represented in your population, that needs to be above the minimum viable population. If you go below that, then you tend to have like inbreeding problems, and it becomes a spiral where you go extinct. So like, you just eventually, like, even if you're not going to go extinct in the next couple of generations, you eventually will.
And it's perfect that you brought that up, because something that Jeanson ignores in his math is he just assumes all of these variants are going to shake out perfectly. But what he ignores is that just through random chance, when the populations are tiny at the beginning, even if you have like Adam and Eve having hundreds of kids and they have hundreds of kids, even those early few generations, you lose most of the variation anyway. It just vanishes.
The one that always gets me, okay, this one's always got me, and maybe because you don't even have to use this very large variant of species. You can just use humans, and you can just use sociology, because you can say, okay, well, and you can just use Genesis and say, okay, so we got Noah's Ark, and then how many years between Noah's Ark and the Exodus? Okay, we've got this number of years, and we need like Tower of Babel to sap, and we need like all of these people to just live in different places.
And there has to be an ice age in there, and you have to tons of speciation. It's chaos, because you get to Middle Kingdom Egypt, and they have all the different cats, all the different waterfowl, all the different raptors.
They're making paper. They've got their own language. Yeah. They got a whole hierarchy and mythology and history that's written down.
Yep. And you have 500 years at most, not including a century for an ice age.
Gupfer2 said, "Who's that Pokemon? It's Panthera pardus."
So we could spend all night going through like the nuts and bolts of why this book is terrible. We're not going to do that. I'm just going to show you some of his arguments. I'm just going to go back to the screenshots here and just show you how lazy it is.
Yes.
So
Show
that
me.
middle paragraph is what I want you to look at, everybody, because one of Jensen's things is saying we have to assume constant mutation accumulation rates going back in time.
Any chance you can zoom that in just a little bit?
I can zoom in on that.
That'd be lovely.
There we go.
Yeah, perfect.
So it's not constant. It's a curve, right? It's not a linear rate. But he says we have to assume a linear rate. Why? To be consistent with evolutionary practice, we should assume constant rates of change in genetics. In other words, when using the mtDNA clock to trace a species' history, we should assume that clock has ticked largely at a constant rate. Now, we have direct data that that's not accurate. We have direct data going. You don't even need to go back 1,000 years, 10,000 years. You can go back 200-300 years to show that that's wrong.
Well, but also, if he's replacing Darwin and changing evolutionary theory, why would he have to be consistent with current evolutionary practices? What are evolutionary practices, by the way?
Oh, so he goes through. It's not on this specific page, but it's actually here's a representative example of this other thing here. Oh no, that's not it. Sorry, that's a different thing. There's another part where he's like, geologists talk about gradual constant changes, and geneticists look at gradual change, or evolutionists look at gradual change. So when we look at genetics rates of change, to be consistent, we have to make them constant. No, you don't. No, you don't. We can test that. They're not linear. It's just not. And the second, that's bad enough, right? That's bad enough. But he's also misrepresenting something here that he knows is wrong. And it's where he says the clock has ticked at a constant rate. Nobody is saying that the rate of mutations changes. The mutation rate is more or less constant. What changes is the rate of accumulation. So when mutations occur in a generation, they're all there. But if you look 5 or 10 or 100 generations later, most of those mutations are gone.
Right, so because we're talking about populations, not about individuals.
Yeah, and maybe somebody doesn't have any grandkids. Maybe we're talking about mitochondrial DNA, which is only passed through daughters. Maybe somebody only has sons, right? So now all those mitochondrial mutations that occurred are gone. So so the accumulation curve is a curve that decreases as you go back in time, whereas the rate at which the clock ticks can be constant. And Jensen very well knows that no one's saying that rate was lower in the past. It's just that mutations are lost.
Now,
he knows this.
Does this change out of curiosity? Okay, so ignoring Jensen for a second. Is there, sorry, Jensen. I don't want to confuse him with Jensen Ackles. I kind of like that dude. Is there a difference based on, if humans live for a longer period of time, does that affect how many mutations they may or may not have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
You just stumbled upon another creationist hypothesis that we could spend a whole hour on. It's this thing called patriarchal drive, because as you know, the biblical patriarchs lived for centuries and they had kids that whole time. And males make sperm throughout their entire lives, and those cells accumulate mutations throughout their entire lives. So a different young Earth creationist, Dr. Rob Carter, actually came up with this model where he has this convoluted kind of two-step curve where it's like a curve and then it's a linear accumulation after 90 years, basically saying where you have to fit it to data that we directly have about human lifespans. And then outside of that, it's just a linear accumulation of mutations. And he says that's how you get all the genetic diversity.
Man,
it's actually an alternative.
I was just thinking about if modern medicine mattered. Shit!
You can think of any random BS, and there's gonna be some creationist thing that they've been we've thought about this. Here's a crazy idea.
I'm gonna stop thinking about things. Clearly, this is a mistake.
You didn't see that one coming.
No, you know what? I didn't know where this was gonna go, and I'm disappointed.
Right. So related to all of this, and the we have to just be consistent thing. I don't need a reason. I'm just being consistent with what y'all evolutionists say. He also,
for no reason,
as part of his hypothesis, is that all of the diversity that exists is due to what was created. And it's almost none of it is due to mutations, because his whole thing is you lose diversity over time. So he says here, talking about like human and chimp similarity, he says if 88% of our differences, right? So 88% of the differences between humans and chimps can, if evolutionists can explain 88% as pre-existing, is it too much of a stretch to bump that number to 99.6? As all of the variation that we see is pre-existing. You already think most of it is. I just want to go a little bit further.
Oh, you can't just do that.
He can and he will.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm sorry, mister. Sorry, he's a PhD. I'm sorry, doctor.
No, he's got a PhD from Harvard.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Harvard.
Yeah, it's from Harvard. So if you have a PhD that's from not an Ivy League, you don't get to make a counter-argument. It doesn't count.
Oh, I mean, I've heard that I'm not allowed to say anything about anything anyway because I've never written in a college textbook, but hey, you know, whatever.
Oh, well, you know. So this is it. He has graphs. He makes graphs to back up his arguments because one of the main things with his everything's linear, right?
Somebody taught him how to use Excel.
Everything is a constant rate, so he says speciation rates are constant. So we can actually look over time in the fossil record, which all happened, you know, within the last 4,000 years, but doesn't matter. It's still a record of biodiversity. So we can see in the fossil record constant linear speciation rates, just as I predict. I'm going to show you some of the graphs he uses that I've annotated with a yellow line. And we'll play a game. The game is called Is It a Line? That's the game. All right, so let's look at some of these graphs. I'm going to zoom in here. Just zoom in on that graph. You'll notice the circles are the data, right? He's done linear regression on all of these, right? That's the dotted line. I don't think that's a line. I think that's a staircase.
Oh, well, yeah, like it goes up at plateaus. This is like, if this was like a statistical graph, or like a graph where you're indicating, like, not to indicate this. At least like, not what it says.
So here's the thing in biology. What you get with biodiversity is staircases, because you get events called adaptive radiation, where like something happens, like all the non-avian dinosaurs go extinct, and then the mammals are like free food and they take over the world, right? So you get these periods where you have rapid speciation events, lots of it happening really fast, and then it slows down because now all the niches are filled, and now you have a competition, but you don't have additional niches to fill, so the rate slows down. And that's exactly what this shows. It doesn't show a linear speciation rate. Here's another one. You'll notice, oh, hang on, see, these are all too small. I gotta zoom in here. You'll notice that
years that's listed here is just
right,
neglected.
1,200 years, yeah. Which is also wrong, by the way, because he only has like 500 years to work with, because Middle Kingdom Egypt is way too soon after the Ark. He has from Ark to Middle Kingdom.
My personal favorite for debunking creationism overall is just know anything about Egypt or China. Know anything about either of those places, and you've just destroyed young Earth creationism.
There was a wonderful, like 20 years ago, there was a wonderful satire news website. It was kind of a lower budget Onion called Satire Wire, and they had a great piece called Sumerians Look On in Confusion as God Creates the World.
Oh, I'm gonna have to find this now. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still around. That was from like when I was in high school, so that was a while ago.
Find the Wayback Machine.
Classic. Yeah, it's there. So you'll notice that we have lots of speciation in the first half of this graph, and then not a lot in the second. But Jeanson just calls it a line. That's cool. And then this one is great.
Cool.
This one is great, bro. where you've got a flat part at the beginning and the end, and then a big jump right in the middle. I mean, we're being a little bit generous here with the linear regression, and then the best one.
Oh, no.
My guy. Dude, are you serious? Are you serious? And he's got like 20 pages of these. He goes, just do, and I just picked like however many. Like there's 15 of them, I think. So yeah.
And
So
this
it's
was all of these were peer reviewed, and everybody at AIG was like, "Yeah, bro, that's a line."
I don't know if the book was. I don't know if the book went through the same peer review process as Answers Research Journal, but the peer review process for Answers Research Journal is like one dude looking it over. So probably.
Did they even find all the typos?
I didn't find any, but that doesn't mean they're not there.
Mm.
So the coda to this replacing Darwin saga is that he subsequently did a debate. The one time that Jeanson has done kind of an open debate about his science. It was on the Non Sequitur show with Dr. Herman Mays. It
Yes.
was a classic. So if you've ever heard, if anyone listening has ever heard somebody say in jest, "But have you read my book?" It's from that debate.
Yeah.
That is the "Have you read my..."
Back in the day when Non Sequitur wasn't a complete dumpster fire.
That was the "Have you read my book" debate. So what happened here is Dr. Herman Mays, was pointing out very specific errors in terms of like the population and evolutionary genetics in Jeanson's book, in terms of like how he does the math of going from extant sequences, working backwards to calculate when they, converged in time. And he pointed out like a number of very basic problems with the genetics that Jeanson did, and Jeanson had no interest in talking about any of that because every point that Mays made, Jeanson demanded a specific page reference for where he made the error that Mays was claiming he made. And Mays literally had like a dog-eared copy of the book and was like, "I have your book right here, dude. This is what you wrote. Just answer the question." And he wouldn't do it. He was just constantly, "Have you read the book?" I don't think you really understand the book. It doesn't seem like you've read the book carefully. Now, we're not going to go through the science here. Instead, I'm just going to tell you that to refute Mays, Jeanson quoted a genetics textbook that provided what he claimed was an equation that allowed him basically take this mutation rate and work backwards in time. And Mays, for a few minutes, didn't know what Jeanson was talking about. If you watch the debate, he's like, "Who? What are you saying?" Because Jeanson was mispronouncing the name of the author of the book. This is like, it's Douglas Fatuma. Is like a very common, like advanced undergrad or early grad school genetics textbook.
Oh, okay, so it's like one that everybody
like
has read.
like if you've taken genetics in grad school or population genetics, or is it like you've encountered this book, even if you didn't have it assigned, like you did readings from this book. Like I never had this book assigned to me, but I did read it. Like I had someone be like, "Here's stuff you're gonna read." He didn't know, he couldn't pronounce the guy's name.
It's like being a lit student and not knowing how to pronounce Odysseus.
Right. It's like he's making an argument based on this book that he supposedly like, "No, I'm providing an authoritative source that I understand better than you do." He can't pronounce he doesn't know the author's name. Like he literally thought, I think that he thought the author was Japanese because that's how he was pronouncing the name. He's not. And then partway through the debate, Mays was like, "Oh, that's who you're. Oh yeah, no, that's not what you're using that wrong. That's wrong. That's like an intro level textbook. You can't do that."
He had like 5 minutes where everybody in the stream except for him was confused until they figured out who they were talking about, and then it just
and then there's like, "Oh, I know what you're saying now that I know who you're trying to." Yeah, so he didn't know. Yeah, so that was kind of very typical of Jeanson, right? Talking very confidently about things he knows nothing about. And that
I would be so embarrassed.
For me, that was the highlight of that debate, was the confusion over who we were talking about there. It was classic.
Amazing.
Now, replacing Darwin, to Jeanson's endless chagrin, he's salty about this 6 years later.
Oh, he's still mad?
Nobody cared about replacing Darwin. No evolutionary biology just collectively just did not care.
I mean, it just looks like some lines on paper to me.
Young Earth creationism did not care. Just didn't care.
Even his own people cared.
Did not make a tsunami, did not make a splash. It made a ripple, and then it faded. And Jeanson's been mad about this ever since, I think. And so he kind of went underground for a little while. did some writing for the Answers Research Journal, but for years he had been teasing that he's working on a book. It's about Y chromosomes, common ancestry, and he's going to basically use Y chromosome sequences collected from all over the world and trace the history of humanity from Noah, through all the modern lineages in the world. So he's collected, tons of sequence data, and he's going to figure this out. And that brings us to his book from last year, 2022, Traced is the name of this book. And it was billed as the Rosetta Stone for, the history of humanity, right? This is going to uncover everything.
We're going to have our minds blown.
Yeah. So
I'm not going to tell you how. Or in what way.
I'm going to go briefly through 3 problems with this book. And I'm going to do it very fast because, again, we don't care about the intricacies of the science here. Just some basic issues that Jeanson surely knows are problems. The first is that what he does is he takes evolutionary trees, phylogenetic trees, which are histories of populations and how they diverge from each other, and he overlays those onto family trees, genealogies, as though every time somebody has kids, that is a branch in the phylogenetic tree, the evolutionary history. Mm-hmm.
No!
Just directly, yup. Mm-hmm. Just directly treats them as one-to-one interchangeable with each other. Yeah.
Oh, no!
And he doubled down on this, last month. He doubled down on this in a video. It was yeah, it's totally okay to do this. Uh-huh.
Okay. You may or may not know this about me, people who are coming to the channel, and if you're new here, and Dr. Dan, you definitely don't know this about me for sure. I don't have any educational background. None. Zero. I dropped out of multiple schools. I suck at learning things in a school setting, and probably in general. But even I know you can't just do that. You can't just take a thing and overlay it on a thing. Okay, I know I did that with Ben's signatures, but that was to indicate that those were the same. They were literally the same. This is the
Yeah. Uh-huh.
No wonder you told me not to look up anything.
I wanted to get this reaction live as you heard about it. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I can't believe this. He just took the speciation over everything.
He'll take
and just
he takes a specific tree. He takes a specific tree and he points to 3 nodes in the middle of it and goes, those 3 nodes right there, those 3, 1, 2, 3, those are Noah's sons' wives. Those 3 nodes represent the 3 daughters-in-law. And then those are the 3 groups that everyone's he literally says each node represents an individual in the evolutionary tree. What are we doing here?
That wouldn't even. Oh no! That wouldn't even work for children.
No, absolutely not. Because me and my wife and my kids are one population, right? That is a single lineage. That is a population. That's what evolutionary trees show. Genealogies are just the families that make that up. So the way I always visualize it is you can take an individual genealogy, right? Parents and kids, and you could zoom out great-grandparents and super great, just zoom out. And all the other people in that same group that are distantly related, 5th, 6th, 7th cousins, all those different relatives, that's your population. And the history of those groups as they split from each other, that's your evolutionary tree. They're not the same thing. And the math is different because phylogenetics, when you're doing what's called convergence, you're working backwards in time to a common ancestor. Genealogy, you're working forwards in time from your ancestors in the past, right? You're tracing something from great-grandpa, right? They're just 2 different processes.
Do you want to tell the viewers, what you do? Or, what your your doctorate is in? So, I think there might be some people here who don't actually know who you are.
Oh. We probably should have started with that. I should have said that at the beginning instead of just launching right into my Jeanson is a liar diatribe. So
who I am doesn't matter. I wear the mask because I'm the people.
No, it's not about credentials. It's about the argument itself. So I'm an evolutionary biologist. My PhD is in molecular genetics and microbiology. My thing is virus evolution That's what I wrote my dissertation on, which is really interesting time these last few years to have done your PhD in viral evolution. Well, it turns out it's a really crowded field because everyone else on the internet also did a PhD in viral evolution. I had no idea.
You've been hanging out on Facebook mom groups?
It's an extremely crowded field. Just everybody on the internet, everybody on Twitter is a PhD in viral evolution. It's very frustrating.
I can't. I have so many questions about this, but that'll be for another time.
We can do that another time.
Yes.
So my specific work was I would look at things like biases in mutation rates, so that my colleagues in the lab were actually doing viral phylogenetics. They were like tracing the histories of viral populations, and my contribution to that was by looking at the different mutation and substitution rates, the rates at which their genomes changed. That was forming like the basis for the models that they would use to figure out the most likely patterns of ancestry.
Right.
So you have to know like what types of mutations are more or less likely, so that when you look at two genomes and you compare them and you see certain things are similar or different, you could calculate the relative frequencies that you would expect and the rates of those different changes. So that's my thing. And yeah.
Chat related. Smitty's asking how many viruses were on the Ark. All of them.
Had to be a lot of them. Had to be a whole lot. But there were a lot of like plant viruses that shouldn't have been able to survive. So I don't know.
COVID-19 was actually on the Ark.
It was actually on the Ark. Yeah. It's actually on the Ark. So that's my thing. So like I feel like sometimes Jensen writes these things specifically to annoy me.
You personally.
What it feels like. It's like me personally. Like it's like I'm gonna be wrong about everything that this guy did his dissertation on specifically.
It's coming for you.
Yeah. So that's
have you ever
the first thing.
Him?
That's.
Have you been?
We'll get there.
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
Oh, I had a conversation with him last summer. Got to talk to him. Yup, that happened. So we'll get there. We're getting there. I know we're already 45 minutes in. I promise we're getting there.
Yeah.
So the second thing that he does wrong, and this is more technical, so I'm just going to say it and say that it's wrong, and we don't have to go into why. But there's two different ways you can measure rates of change. One is the mutation rate. That's how fast mutations occur in DNA. Just every time you copy your DNA, a certain number of like bases are going to be wrong, right? That's the mutation rate. Just how fast do the changes happen? And then there's this other thing called the substitution rate, which is how fast do those things accumulate in populations, right? So if a certain mutation happens, how long does it take for everybody to have that mutation in the population, right? So these are different things. These are different metrics. And the mutation rate is going to be a lot higher than the substitution rate because most mutations, just by chance, you lose them. Like we were talking about before, like there's stuff that's only passed through daughters. Well, like if a woman only has sons, then her mutations in her mitochondrial DNA are gone, right? They're out. So they occurred, but they didn't substitute. So the rates are different. They're not the same thing. Jensen, last summer, when I hopped onto an open mic show that he was on, that was his mistake. He did an open mic show. And it's like, hi, been waiting to talk to you for a while. I asked him about this. And I said, like, I just want to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding you. You are using this number as this number for the purposes of your calculations. And he just straight up said, like, yes, I'm using the mutation rate as a substitution rate, like direct quote. And
did he just like think that you weren't there to dunk on him?
I have no idea. He did this open mic show to promote Traced, and I don't know why he did it. But he did. So we ended up talking for an hour.
Oh boy.
And I got two great things out of it. I got two absolutely great moments out of it. That was one of them. Mm-hmm. I'll get to the second one later because it's just perfect. But that was one of them because for years I have been arguing he uses the mutation rate so that he conflates these two numbers, and you can't do that. The math doesn't work when you do that. It's just very clear. We have data, we have experiments. You can't do that.
Right, but why would you conflate those numbers anyway? Like, what's the justification?
Because the mutation rate is faster, so that you can fit more diversity into less time.
Oh, you mean it fits my foregone conclusion, so I'm forcing numbers into places they're not supposed to be.
Exactly. So instead of taking 200,000 years to accumulate all the divergence we see in humans, it only takes 5,000 years to do it if you use the faster rate. That's why he does it. And for years, people have been telling me, other creationists have been like, you're straw manning him. He doesn't do that. It's more sophisticated than that. He's making a more complex argument. Nobody would do that. Nobody would just use the one for the other. And then I asked him, and he was straight up like, yep, I use the mutation rate as a substitution rate.
You just threw those people right under the bus.
Just every other creationist that's defended him, just right on. They got tire tracks, just, oof. Yeah, right under the bus.
Oof.
So then the third thing that he does, and this is possibly the best, is that he just ignores data. Like, there are data that directly contradict things he says in the book, and his solution to that is to pretend it doesn't exist. And an example of this is great.
Do that?
He's like, to have the ability, both the shamelessness and the tenacity, just like, no, it's fine, just ignore it. So there's the way we measure diversity in Y chromosomes. It's a thing called haplogroups. It doesn't matter what they are. It's just different types of Y chromosomes. And there's a specific example he uses called R1b. R1b. And he says that R1b got into Western Europe in the 1400s. That's when this genetic variant arrived in like Italy and France. 1400s is what he said. So very recently. There's a Stone Age specimen that was uncovered, a burial in northern Italy, dating back to Stone Age. So we're looking, tens of thousands of years in the past. That was haplotype R1b. Now, the options here are that that Stone Age specimen was actually a medieval specimen that was, a late medieval specimen that was incorrectly characterized as Stone Age.
Sure.
Or maybe there was a Stone Age civilization camping out in northern Italy undetected for tens of thousands of years.
Sure.
Or maybe Jensen's wrong about when R1b entered Italy. One of those three things. Because even if you go by Jensen's dates, the young Earth timeline, the Stone Age occurred 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. It was in the immediate aftermath of the Tower of Babel. So, even if you, because something about, he explains it in the book, it's something about like our technology was dropped to a primitive level due to the confusion of the languages.
I was gonna buy that to say that, well, when only 6 people survived, obviously not all, they couldn't bring all technology with them, so that would have, but no, because the language changed, everybody
it was the confusion of the languages returned to.
That's not how that works.
Yeah, that's how Jensen says it works.
I almost bought it. It had me in the first half.
So even in his own timeline, that specimen is off by like 3,000 years. Like, it's just, it breaks his timeline. The other thing he ignores are Neanderthals, and we just keep getting more and more Neanderthal DNA. It's awesome. But the thing is, humans make this nice, neat little group in an evolutionary tree called a clade. And Neanderthals make another nice little neat group over here, and the common ancestor of these two, because they're different from each other, has to be further in the past. That's just how the math works. If you're more divergent, it takes longer to converge at a common ancestor.
Right.
Jensen ignores this. He says that Neanderthals are descended from Noah's Ark, so they must converge at the same time frame as everybody else with Adam and Eve, but they're more divergent. And he mentions Neanderthals 3 times in this book. Once to define them, and 2, just say like Neanderthals are this other group, blah, blah, blah. And then 2 to say that they're in the immediate post-Ark era.
But after the Ark.
Yeah.
So they either survived the flood, evolved.
No, they got off the Ark.
They were on the Ark.
They're descended from Noah's family. They're descended from Noah's family.
Okay, so Noah was a Neanderthal.
I think the contention is that Neanderthals are a divergent group that kind of evolved to adapt to northern cold climates after the Ark. So people got off the Ark, and then I guess it had to be after the Babel radiate. Well, no, it could have been before because everyone other than that would have died. So it could be either way, but either
I have an idea.
I
have a proposition. No, the wives of Noah's sons were Neanderthals.
I might incorporate that into.
Or Noah and his family were Neanderthals, and the wives were humans, like Homo sapiens.
Team, are we writing this down? Write that down.
Everybody. Right?
We're going to write that down. We're going to incorporate that into my model because I have a whole young Earth model that solves a lot of problems. Like for example, part of my model is that the arc Ararat is actually Kilimanjaro. Because we came from Africa. That's not up from debate, but if the arc lands in Kilimanjaro, it solves a lot of problems for creationists.
Right, it would solve the whole...
Solves so many problems.
Solves a lot of problems.
Solves the whole... Yeah.
Wow, it's almost like if you take the racism part out of it, you can kind of fix things a little easier.
Then it works, yeah. All right, so that's the third thing, is that he just ignores these very clear data that directly contradict his model, and his answer to them is to stick his fingers in his ears. Like, that's his answer.
Of course.
No, you can forget all of that, because none of that matters, because the underpinning of his book is the mutation rate thing.
Right.
You take this mutation rate and apply it backwards in time in a linear fashion, and you converge at the date he needs you to converge.
And you
to.
take a number that you're just swapping with another number. Okay, so the premise is... So I'm going to show you how he calculated his mutation rate, because you don't need anything else other than this. So this is a figure from the paper where he got the mutation rate. And normally when you do this kind of work, what you're going to do is you're going to go into the supplemental data for the paper, and you're going to look at their sequences, and you're going to, like, do the math. It's not what he did. What he did is he took this figure, and he said, hey, you know what? See these little pairs right here where it's just short little lines that diverge at the ends of each branch right there? He says, and this is for Y chromosomes, this is for what he's looking at. He says, I bet those little pairs represents fathers and sons. I bet that's a father and a son, each little pair there. So those are fathers and sons. So what I can do, I being Jensen, what I can do is I have a scale bar down here. So if I zoom in really far, I can measure the pixels, and that's going to tell me how many mutations are in each father-son pair, and I can get the one generation mutation rate. And then I can use that to calculate backwards. Oh my god, he's playing big brain Matt game theory. Somebody call that Pat. We're measuring pixels on Mario to see how long his dick is. What the fuck?
That's how he calculates the mutation rate. To the extent we could say he calculates the mutation rate, that's how he does it. This, by the way, I got this work from Dr. Herman Mays, the same Dr. Mays who debated Jensen on replacing Darwin. He dug in. I didn't even look this deep into his methods because I read the book and documented the other errors that we talked about. And it was like, I don't care about the mutation rate. It doesn't matter to me. Mays looked into it, and he's like, I don't think he's doing the mutation rate correctly. I'm going to find out how he's doing it. That's how he did it. He's measuring the length of those teeny little branches by comparing it to that 50 mutation scale bar. And then he's saying each father-son pair has X number of mutations. So here's your average per generation mutation rate, and let's use that to count backwards. That's what he's doing.
Oh my god, that's so arbitrary. But okay.
I feel like I've said this before, but I'm going to say it one more time. I'm going to say it at least one more time. It gets worse.
No, how do you get? Okay.
Because Dr. Mays emailed the authors of this paper and said, hey, are these, like, I see that those are probably father-son pairs, and can we actually calculate, like, get the number of mutations based on this? Can we use this figure to derive the number of mutations? And here's what they said. I think most of the differences are errors. I was looking through the supplements of my Y chromosome paper to find some numbers. The phylogenetic tree is made using around 3,000 SNPs, that's mutations, single nucleotide polymorphisms, and the error rate is around 1 in 1,000, which means for every 1,000 nucleotides they sequence, they have an error, right? One error. And so if you read 1,000 bases, on average, one of them is going to be wrong, right? So they did their Y chromosome sequence, and they have this 1 in 1,000 error rate. So while you can certainly use this data to construct a phylogenetic tree, I would not use it for inferring mutation rates, because most of those mutations that Jensen identified to get his fast mutation rate are actually sequencing errors, because that's not what this paper was about. It wasn't about precise sequencing, so they didn't do the
They didn't
quality
need to worry
control.
about it. Yeah, it wasn't.
They didn't care. They were not. That's not what they were studying. That costs money. That costs time. They didn't need to do it. So Jensen is taking artifacts of sequencing errors and treating them as the canonical per generation mutation rate. Nothing else I said about this book matters. it's built on this foundation that the numbers are just
Is
completely made up.
Is there a reason why each pixel would be 1? Like, was that part of
Oh,
the
no, it's not that
sequencing
it's
of the
1.
papers?
He's scaling it. It's not that it's 1. It's that he's scaling it
Okay.
with the... So he zoomed in super precisely, and he's scaling it with the... So that scale bar there was 50 mutations. So he's just like, if the 50 mutation scale bar was X number of pixels, and each little branch is Y number of pixels, like, he's just scaling it to the scale bar.
Okay. Oh my god.
But it doesn't matter because most of those mutations are fake.
Errors.
They're not real mutations. They're
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 just
sequencing errors.
Yeah.
And if you were doing like real precise sequencing,
That'd be a problem.
you would clean up your data. You would double check that.
Oh, well,
and
that
you
would be a
would figure out-
huge problem if that's what you were actually focusing on. 1 in 1,000
more
is a
money.
lot.
It costs more money. It costs more time. It's computationally more intense. So if you don't have to do it, don't do it. Right?
Well, it's also not what they're saying. Right? It's like it's
that's-
not like they're presenting this like they're presenting this as if it is some kind of sequencing Bible,
Right.
or if it was some kind of
Right.
like authority on sequencing. And they're like, no,
It's not.
This isn't what
Yeah.
this is about. It's like if I took
Yeah.
like a sketch of something and I said, "This is an elephant. Is it an aesthetically perfect elephant, or does it like
Right.
fit all of the anatomy, or do I just need to represent an elephant? It's like 3 gray blobs."
Exactly. Yeah. Right. For my class, I'm constantly using like this circle is a cell. This smaller circle is a nucleus. Like, are they like
Scaled properly?
No, they represent stuff. It doesn't matter, right? Same
Right.
thing here. This paper was about like structural differences in the Y chromosome, where the sequence, the actual bases didn't matter that much. So like they didn't need super precise numbers, so they didn't do it. It just didn't matter. Jeanson takes that and just pulls it, and the authors then say, you can't use our sequence data are not precise enough. We would never do that with our own numbers. You can't do it. So this whole book, this supposed Rosetta Stone, is just built on completely fabricated numbers here. It's just nothing about it is valid.
Jesus Christ. So not only we have like at minimum, right? I'm being as charitable as possible. He's just swapping numbers, and we have the data he's looking at isn't even accurate in the first place, so his premise is just bunk. Oh, and for some reason, the premise that he's presenting. Sorry, I'm going to give 3 for this because
Go for it.
because I'm going to give him the third one. So the third one is that he's got this idea that he's replacing Darwin and replacing evolutionary theory, but he's still trying to fit it in with current usages or current methods within evolutionary biology, which if he was actually presenting something brand new, is not necessary or probably
Why do you
even
have to do that?
desired. You wouldn't even want to.
Yeah.
What? Okay. All right. I guess I just
you're
have to accept this. Why?
because Jeanson says so, and he has a PhD from Harvard. And have you read his book anyway? I don't think you've read his book.
I don't read. I'm a goblin.
So he really does. He really genuinely is offended, it seems, by the thought that somebody could read his work and not agree with him.
Oh, he's one of those.
Comes through.
Oh, he's one of those people that's
what,
just like, if they just understood what I was saying, they would agree with me.
And if they disagree, then they must not understand.
They don't understand, yeah. Oh, no. Everyone in the world is dumb but me.
That is, I think that's a pretty good characterization. That, in my experience, that is a pretty good characterization. Yeah. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take down the screen share here.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to take that down. I'm going to see, we didn't have time to test this, so it may not work, and that's okay if it doesn't, because
crossed.
I have the quote, but seeing the video would be preferable. So what I'm going to do here,
you might need to send me the video because it might not get audio going.
Okay,
through
I'm going to send you a link with a timestamp. Then is that possible?
Yes,
like a
that
YouTube
is
link with a timestamp.
Yep, I can do that.
Okay, so that's what I'm going to pull up real fast here. This will just take a second, everybody, because the culmination of all of this is that I hopped onto this live stream with Jeanson last summer on this call-in show, and
Boy.
you know, it was a very interesting conversation. And I started with a very simple question about the Neanderthals of like, why don't you take that stuff seriously? We ended up going through a bunch of the stuff that we just talked about phylogenies and mutation and substitution rates, and we talked about all this stuff. But there's one moment where I asked him about the thing I mentioned a little while ago, the 3 branch points, and I said, like, you say these are the 3 daughters, but that's not how you interpret phylogeny. There's no way to make that work the way you want it to work. So I'm just pulling up, I'm just looking for this video here, which I will find momentarily. Let's see. Here we go. Got it. I'm just going to pull up this moment here because it is a perfect illustration of how he can just talk out of his butt and act as though he has made his point conclusively and expects everyone to just get on board with it. So just give me a moment. I'm going to send you a YouTube link with a timestamp in a second here.
I will also then use this time to be like, hey, yo, like, share, subscribe, check out the links in the description if you would like to follow Dr. Dan's YouTube channel, where he does go into some of the more detailed stuff that we're kind of skimming over here. Also, you know, sharing and stuff helps the channel and yada yada yada. If you've been supporting, great, thank you so much. There was also a super chat that went through from Vandalia for 5 that says, don't forget we're still living for a few hundred years before reproducing after the flood, so there's another gap in the records. And like the thing is like somebody called it the Young Earth Creationist MCU, and cinematic universe, and I'm definitely a fan because it does come across that way. It does come across with like just competing, what's the word I'm looking for? Continuities. At least that's what it seems like to me. Are you gonna send this to me on Discord or Twitter?
Okay, I am going to send you. I just had to find the timestamp of the exact thing.
Yeah, no worries.
Here we go. I got it. So this is going to be about a 30 or 40 second little clip here. And you all are gonna know when I'm putting the link in the Discord. You all are gonna know. So that should be timestamped to the exact time at about 8:13 or so.
Perfect.
You all are gonna know when he says the thing that I want you all to hear. It'll be about 30 or 40 seconds. And this is the thing I said earlier, where he's got this phylogeny, and he says the 3 nodes correlate to the 3 daughters-in-law. And I had just said to him, you know, or I will say to him that you can't translate that the way he wants to do it in a way that actually works.
I'm just letting the ad go by.
Oh yeah, perfect. Sorry.
Oh no, you don't have to be sorry for
this is the last thing here, because this moment, his explanation for how this works is, I think, the most perfect microcosm for Jensen's approach to everything he does. It's just, you'll see.
Oh, I am smart.
And the fact that he said this, that he said this, you'll see my reaction after is just like, oh, okay, we can move on then. That's fine. Thank you for saying that amazing thing you just said.
Let me just make sure my audio goes in, because I trust nothing when it comes to anything ever. Yeah. Audio.
There's so many of me.
There's so many of you. You're everywhere. He's multiplying. Jensen better look out. Alright. Done. Alright, here we go.
Instead of having a free pot shot.
Just saying, it's how phylogenetics works. It's when you root it, you have to have, so those lines get converted into ancestor-descendant relationships. So the fact that they're connected in kind of daisy chains like this, right? It's either going to get converted into a situation where you have a kind of grandparent, parent, grandchild, or if it's in between, it's going to be some kind of parent offspring or parent descendant relationship. It's not going to be 3 coexisting individuals.
Right.
It's again, it's a small point that's not related to the Neanderthal thing, but it is relevant.
No, I agree with it. And that's my point, is that there could have been some wonky things pre-flood that I discuss in the literature.
Have you read my book?
Okay. So, okay. There you go.
That they could still be contemporary in time, because...
You can pause it.
Oh. Yep.
So his response to my critique of like you're misinterpreting the tree was, yeah, your interpretation is correct, but there could have been some wonky things pre-flood that get the
Wonky
population
things.
structure I want. That was his answer. Wonky things pre-flood. And he's like, this is my explanation to you as to why you're still wrong, despite me agreeing with your interpretation.
Can I just
Perfect.
point something out just real quick? And like maybe this is me being petty, but that guy absolutely looks like a youth pastor. Like, he looks like you would see the youth pastor or like the music guy who's always like jumping on the stage. He's that guy.
Uh-huh.
He's got a guitar. He only
wrong.
knows how to play. He only knows how to play church songs and Wonderwall.
He does have that vibe.
He has that vibe.
So that is our stroll down memory lane for Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson.
Oof.
I hope you feel enlightened and horrified.
My mind has been blown, and I don't want to talk about in how many ways and in what directions, because I'm gonna have to. I finished my drink real quick, if you didn't notice. I'm gonna need another one.
Should have warned you. It's bad. It's bad.
You know, I should have known better. Savage Cobra for 5 says it's not hard to talk about one of the lower GI tracts when one's cranium is already lodged there. Took a while to get that past the sensors. You know what? I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
That was creative. Very creative. So that's Jeanson. That is the saga of Nathaniel Jeanson, from use and abuse my training to wonky things pre-flood.
To some lines on paper, to I'm just subbing some numbers for other numbers, to
Just switching them, and that's totally what I'm doing. Yep.
It's fine. This is fine. Well, you know, if he ever wants to come on to Debate Hub, come on down.
He definitely. So I will say he definitely Googles himself. So. Nate, told you before, come on down. We had such a good chat last time. We should do it again.
Oh yeah, I listen. I may be biased, but I am fair. Don't talk to me.
I'm also biased. I'll present your arguments fairly. That's not going to help.
I mean, you did quote right. You did quote him directly. You had clips from his thing. Yes, that's fair.
I got books, and I've read his books and his
fair,
papers.
balanced, neutral. Yeah,
all of them.
I can see why you didn't want me to look at this. I probably would have just laid a full-on egg.
This is where you have to get the reactions in real time to some of this stuff.
Oh my god, I don't know how to. I don't even know where to go from here.
Brightest. This is the best and brightest that Ken Ham puts forward for almost a year now, because this book came out last March. So almost a year at AIG has been wall-to-wall coverage of Traced and how it's the answer, and how this is, creationists are taking it to the evolutionists, and we're doing our own science, and we've come up with a hypothesis that has data behind it, and you all aren't accepting it because you don't like our ideas.
You just don't understand.
You're biased. Like, this guy's work would, fail my intro evolution class that I teach every summer. Like, he would fail that class. It's just wrong. All of this is wrong.
Oh, well, and he knows it's wrong because he graduated with a PhD.
Yeah, he knows this is all BS. He knows. And again, going back to that frog and cat figure that I showed you at the development and evolution, nobody thinks less of their audience than this guy. You
have to be steeped in it. You'd have to be steeped in it to buy this shit.
It really is. I mean, he's not trying to persuade me. He's not trying to persuade, Dr. Herman Mays or anyone else in the mainstream evolution community. This is reassurance for young Earth creationists to say, there is science that validates what you believe. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I did the math. You don't have to. Don't look into it. It's fine.
Well, I imagine that, okay, so this is, best case scenario. This is fraud. Gaslighting.
Lying to people.
Yeah, gaslighting. Lying. You're presenting something as it's not. This if you want to take...
There's a lot of straw manning.
If you want to take...
Tons of straw manning.
If you want to take, the Christian view of what this would be, is I would call this a false prophet. And like, this is just manipulative, mean.
Oh, it's so manipulative. And again, we can't, it's not just Jensen, right? This is Ken Ham's go-to science guy, right? He has a trained geneticist on staff, Dr. Georgia Purdom. Her degree is in genetics. She hasn't commented on any of this stuff. It's the developmental biologist doing it.
Well, it's
the guy.
It's the lie by omission, right? She's just like, well, I didn't say it was true.
Didn't see it. I didn't see it. Don't ask me about Traced. I didn't see it.
Well, I do know that Georgia, at least back in the day, used to not comment about genetics. Like, she just never really talked about that.
I have one video of her that's supremely dishonest, where she quotes a paper, and she says the quote is something along the lines of, when you see claims like this, like demand uncertainty. And what she omitted from that was, and she made it seem like the authors of this paper were talking about an entire technique in general. What she omitted was a series of references at the end of that sentence. The authors were critiquing a specific set of papers that they thought were too precise, and the authors did not have appropriate error bars around their data.
Oh, no.
She applied and she took out the references when showing the quote on screen and made it seem like the authors were saying that that entire technique is questionable, when really they were like, this set of papers, these 5 papers, they did not account for the errors sufficiently.
Wow.
So she's not good either. She doesn't get a pass in my book, but she has not said anything on Traced that I have found.
Smart.
So, yeah. Dr. Rob Carter of Creation Ministries International earlier this year reviewed Traced, and it was Dr. Jensen gave it a really good try. He really put a lot of effort into this, and he really deserves a lot of credit for trying to build a comprehensive creation model. I don't know if this is it, but he should get a lot of credit for trying.
I feel like yours is probably better.
That was the tone of the review. Whereas the tone of my review is, what is this bullshit?
I mean, yeah, that's what my brain is currently processing right now. What the f did I just witness? So, I think we've been live for a little over an hour. Is there more to this, or is this like have we reached the bottom of the barrel?
Okay, so I'll tell one more brief thing.
That's a no.
I will tell you one more brief thing, because this happened just within the last few weeks.
Oh boy.
Jensen had been for months, since last summer, in his video series for AIG, teasing, I'm going to respond to the critics. I'm going to have a comprehensive response to the critics. I'm going to do it. And he finally did it a few weeks ago. Posted a video. It was like half an hour long. He's going to respond to the critics. The total response to the critics was about 6 minutes. He mentioned 3 people. Was Dr. Joel Duff, Dr. Herman Mays, and me. Those are 3 people he mentioned. And then he says, I'm gonna talk about this Dan guy, because he's done the most on this. He won't shut up, so I'm gonna talk about him. And then what he did is he pulled up a screenshot of my video review of this book, where I had a figure explaining the difference between phylogeny and genealogy on it. And he paused it and he goes, look at that slide. Look at the reference in the corner. You see that? That's a textbook reference. He's citing a textbook. He's just saying I'm wrong because the textbooks say I'm wrong. The textbook reference, which is something that I said in the video, the textbook reference was the source for the picture I used on the slide. It wasn't where I got the argument. It was the source for the picture. And I said, in the video, I'm using a picture from this textbook. It's a really good textbook. And I held up the textbook and was like, here's the textbook. And so the reference was for the image.
Yeah.
The argument was independent of the image. The image was just illustrating the concepts. There was no but he's like, they treat textbooks as their Bible. You can't question the textbook. They are actually a religion. We're doing the real... Dude, I wasn't citing the textbook. I was just providing the reference for the figure.
If anybody wants to see the picture.
That was it. And that was his response. That was months. I'm going to respond. I'm going to respond. That was his response. Didn't talk about genealogy and phylogeny on the merits. Didn't talk about the silly 3-node interpretation. Didn't talk about substitution mutation rates. Didn't talk about Neanderthals or any of the other data he omits. None of it.
And he only spent, and of a half an hour, he only spent 6 minutes.
It was
Talking
like
about
it was
3
6 minutes.
people.
Yeah. I did a video on this a couple weeks ago, and I showed the entirety of the part that he did. I was like, I'm just going to show 5 minutes straight through, and then we'll talk about it. And it was out of like a 32-minute video. It was like 3/4 of the way through. It was 5 minutes.
This dude is a petty little bitch.
He is. Yes, he is.
Oh my god.
Yes.
It's almost impressive. It's almost impressive.
So now that is for now the end of the Jensen saga. I left out a bunch of other errors he made. Like there's other stuff that's wrong.
Well, people should go to your channel to see like more in depth.
He does. I've got hours of shit on this guy because he just can't stop, and then I can't stop myself. So every time he opens his mouth, I have to like comment because it's fun.
Yeah, that's fair.
So yeah,
that's fair. I respect that.
So that's yeah. So that's Jensen, everybody. I hope you're horrified. So,
I'm probably gonna like have nightmares tonight. I'm probably going to wake up in a cold sweat tomorrow morning, and then I'm gonna send you a message being
welcome.
angry.
You're welcome.
Well,
look, I have to suffer through him. Everyone else has to do it with me.
That is fair. That's fair. Definitely go find out Dr. Dan's stuff. It's in the description down below. You can find him on Twitter. He's at Creation Myths. You can find him on YouTube at Creation Myths. Go and check it out if you want to know more about Jensen. And yeah, no, go. Shield.
Actually, not at Creation Myths on Twitter. So I got the best Twitter handle. It's at the Evolutionist.
Oh, that's right, Evolutionist.
I'm at the Evolutionist. I'm
yes.
the Evolutionist on Twitter. So Creation Myths is the name, but it's at the Evolutionist.
Yes. Links are down below. Thank you so much for joining us. If you super chatted, thanks so much. If you're a member, thank you so much for supporting the channel. Consider becoming a member or a Patreon. Links are also down below. I will be back on Wednesday with Jackson Wheat and RJ. We're going to be talking about their book. So hopefully we'll be talking about a good book instead of whatever the hell we just witnessed.
It's a good book. It's a good book. You should all buy the book. It's a good book.
And do you have any last comments about gender before we take off?
Oh my goodness, don't get me started. Gender and sex are bimodal. They're not binary. For anyone that spent that week on Twitter with me, shared that experience with me. This isn't hard. This is not complicated. It's not hard.
And if you want to see more about that,
go
check out, he's already angry. Go check out the video from Friday. And hopefully Dr. Dan will join us again soon to talk a little bit more about some of his other shenanigans. Thank you so much for coming. I really, really appreciate it. I had a great time.
Happy to.
This
was super fun.
I'm pretty sure this gave me some kind of cancer and of the brain.
Really bad. I warned you. I warned you it was bad. I don't think you were prepared.
I was not. I you know what? And in my defense, I did say, normally when I tweet out that we're going live, I say you guys aren't prepared. This time I was like, I am not prepared. Thank you so much, everybody. We're going to get on out of here. Have a good night. I hope you have a good week. I will see you all tomorrow. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.